Everybody, and welcome to today's call. My name is Sarah Cohen. I'm the director of Jewish National Fund Speakers Bureau, and it's my pleasure to introduce you to our featured speaker today. He's a man who's devoted his whole life to build a stronger Israel for the next generation, and it's really been very pleasant to be working with him over the last few weeks, putting this trail experience together for all of you to enjoy and participate in. I now turn over the program to Aryeh. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Dan, and thank you, team at JNF. It's wonderful to be partnering like this. I have to say, first of all, and welcome all of you back, or welcome you to the program now. If you're watching live, it's the evening time here in Israel. And if you're watching the recorded version, well, whatever time it is for you, good evening. It's really lovely to have you back to join us. So today we're actually, again, on the Israel Trail. And because of the lighting, I'm afraid that you're not going to be able to see quite about an hour ago when I got up here on the trail. I'm keeping you in suspense exactly where we are for a few minutes. When I got up here on the trail, looking out over the view behind me, where of course you mostly see a very, very bright sun, you can see all the way to the Mediterranean Sea from where I am right now. You can see Tel Aviv. We can see the town of Modi'in in the nearer distance. That might give you a little bit of a hint of what we're looking at. In fact, just to make it fun, I'm going to turn my camera around and let you see a picture of the Jerusalem hills in the fading light of an almost sunset. That is down there, the Jerusalem-Tel Aviv highway. You can see in the distance, a bit hazy. As I said an hour ago, you could see actually Tel Aviv there in the distance. And you could see the Mediterranean Sea. There are the hills of Samaria in the distance. We're, of course, here in the hills of Judea. No, don't get too excited. That was not a political statement. That was a geographical description, using the terms having been used for the last 2.5, perhaps 3,000 years. Here we are. Trail. This is the trail sign, that welcome sign that we talked about last week. And to begin, I'd like to ask you to walk with me on the trail as we walk to a very important and unusual site, which I'll be describing shortly. As we walk there, I'd like to review just very briefly some of the discussion we had last week, for those of you joining us now for the first time. And I'm going to switch back and forth between your being able to see me, fun part of walking with me on the trail, as we wind our way through a ridge, which is called the Mishlatim, a ridge of hills here in the Jerusalem mountains, where there were certain points, there were certain hilltops which controlled the road below. The road that you can see, sorry for the finger, you can see the road, the new road to Jerusalem down there. Of course, that follows the same path, even though the road itself has been expanded a number of times in the last 70 years. These hills really control that very, very important route to Jerusalem. In the end, we had to build something called the Burma Road, which is in fact, part of which is on the Israel Trail, not where we're walking right now, but very similar to where we're walking, which was dug through the mountainside in order to bypass that main highway between Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, in order to both supply Jerusalem and to ensure that the ability to access Jerusalem was assured, was constant, because that was part and parcel of our of the Yeshuv's, the country's claim to Jerusalem. If it was cut off, then that would have, to a certain extent, prejudiced our claim and worked against us. That's a bit of history for us. as we hike up to the top of the hill here. And I wanted to review the two main points that we covered last time as we walked together in the desert, in the silence of the Negev desert. We were, if you were with us at Arad, that silence of the desert, and we were talking about how the overwhelming aloneness of the desert gave me such a feeling of humility, which was a very important element of my journey, because I was not just taking a physical journey, hiking the Israel Trail, as you know if you were with us last week, but I was recovering from a devastating divorce. And the process of healing that I talk about started with that sense of perspective on my place in the universe. And then we talked about on the side of a hill, side of a mountain, Mount Shlomo, where I felt I just couldn't go any further. And in the end, I just had to accept that this is where I was, the side of a mountain. Nobody's going to come save me. Hiking up Mount Shlomo, which was excruciatingly steep. And that acceptance of reality, this is where I am. This is where I've got to. It doesn't matter why or how. I have to accept that and figure out what the path is, what are the next steps. That was the second lesson that I learned that we talked about last week, that I learned while hiking the trail, but which was definitely applicable to the situation I found myself in, divorced, full of sadness, sorrow, frustration, anger, resentment, and the importance of being able to accept that this is my reality, and that I had to, like on the mountain, had to figure out a way forward. That was a lot of our discussion last week. We also talked about the historical element of hiking the Israel Trail, which is unique. You don't get the same sense of walking the footsteps of our own forefathers or ancestors as one does on a trek elsewhere in the world. And we're going to feel that very much as we delve into both the location that we're at now and the topics for today. But looking at this view, I want to share with you one element that I discuss in my book, and that is, as I came closer and closer to Jerusalem, I felt such a familiarity, because I live actually not far from here. I live just over the hills there where the setting sun is, in the small town of Beit Shemesh. And the Israel Trail spends about a week circumnavigating the town of Beit Shemesh. And as I approach this area with these so familiar green hills, with trees planted, of course, by the JNF and by donations from Jews across the world, as I approached these hills, the recognition that I had and the pleasure that I had of hiking through them and seemingly close to home was something which filled me with a sense of gratitude, which just reinvigorated the appreciation that I had had over the preceding 2.5 years leading up to the divorce, of all of the support that I'd received from my children, my parents, from my wider family, my brother, from my friends who are, as for many of us who move here and don't have close family living here in Israel, my friends who are literally family. The kind of gratitude that I had was almost emotional, I would say. I want to share with you, if I can share my screen, a photo of the first that I saw a flower while hiking the trail. There's the flower. The first bit of color that I saw while hiking through the desert literally brought me to tears. It brought me to tears because I was just so appreciative after the browns and the grays and the blacks and the yellows of the desert. I was just so appreciative of the fact that I now had some color and color to look forward to, which I then enjoyed for the remainder, of course, of the trip. That gratitude was something that I had already experienced then in the desert, and I was so grateful for virtually everything that all the blessings in my life, the ability that I had to hike the trail, the generosity of my employers, honest reporting, the financial ability that I had to have this experience, and even the the privilege that I had to hike the trail itself, the privilege that we have of living in this country after ancestors dreamed for 2,000 years of this eventuality. And that was a very, very big part of my journey and of my experience. And of course, it was a very important part for me within the context of our Jewish tradition, because we say every morning, those of us who are traditionally observant, or even those of us who are less observant, I'm sure, recognize our tradition of gratitude, of saying Modeh Ani every morning. I am thankful to you, God, of including these expressions of gratitude and appreciation in our prayers 3 times a day, in benching, in the Birkat HaMazon, the blessing after a meal, being grateful for Jerusalem, being grateful for food and sustenance. And of course, today, with the situation that we're in now, whether it's the economic downturn across the world, of course, the COVID-19 virus, gratitude that we have and appreciation for our health, for our ability to put food on the table. It's a very, very important part of Jewish tradition. And for me, it became a meditative framework in my prayer, the combination of the humility that I learned in the desert and that silence, the acceptance that I was experiencing in terms of acknowledging the reality of the world around me, and the gratitude. Those 3 came together in a lovely and important meditative practice, which I actually describe in much more detail in the book. I happen to have a copy of the book here, My Israel Trail, which I brought out because I wanted to read to you another section from it like I did last week. But combining those elements really led for me to an incredible experience of personal growth. And I wanted to share that with you. I was grateful for the last Snickers bar that I had in my pack. I was grateful to my daughter-in-law for the walking sticks that she gave me. I was just really appreciative of all the blessings in my life. I have a quote, which I also used in the book, which I want to share with you, from Lao Tzu, who said, "Be content with what you have. Rejoice in the way things are. When you realize there is nothing lacking, the whole world belongs to you. From wonder into wonder, existence opens." And for me, that expresses the feeling and the joy that I had and that I have hiking as I did today to get to the point we're at now, which I'll describe to you momentarily. But you might imagine that the gratitude that I'm describing was a little bit not so intuitive, as it were. But I still also felt a tremendous appreciation for the faith-filled home and life that I had built with my former wife. I was extraordinarily grateful for that. And that sounds counterintuitive, because that gratitude after a 28-year marriage was broken up. Obviously, it was difficult with my wife's leaving. But the truth is that realizing my own inconsequentiality, this humility, and accepting that reality, and pushing myself to remember and appreciate all the wonderful aspects of my life, really was a crucial part of the process, enabling me to reach what's the 4th element, which is what I want to talk about now, and then connect it to where we are now. And that 4th element was an issue of forgiveness. Now, I don't want to go into all sorts of details, but what's important to understand is that I was hiking the trail from the south in Eilat to the north in the Lebanese border, 1,000 kilometers, all alone, with the 50-pound pack on my back, a solo trek, which took me 48 days of hiking, 8 weeks, not hiking on Shabbat. And I did it primarily because I was so full of sorrow and anger, and, as I mentioned, resentment, because we had a wonderful marriage, and my wife's leaving literally turned my life upside down. And although it was her right to make that decision, it was a very, very difficult blow to me. And so forgiveness, and forgiving her, and forgiving God, forgiving myself, forgiving fate for leading me to this position and causing such sorrow and such pain, was not something that was very easy to come by. Intellectually, up here, I recognized her right to make her decision, and I forgave her in my mind. When I gave her the get, the religious bill of divorce, I said to her, this is the greatest act of love that I could possibly do for you. I want you to be happy. And if this is what's going to make you happy, then because I still love you and I want you to be happy, I will give you this divorce. And that kind of expresses how much I had forgiven her. But forgiving intellectually and forgiving from the heart or from the gut are two different things. And I had an incredible experience up north where I'd like to show you some more photos, but I'll perhaps do so in a bit because I don't want to get distracted, and it's a bit hard to do so from the phone. The truth is that the forgiveness that I eventually achieved came to me in an experience in a spring on the border with Lebanon, called it's more of a river or a creek, the Hatzbani, the Snir River, where I jumped into a pool where my wife and I had taken our children a number of times on vacations and enjoyed tremendously. And I jumped in the stream and recognized that I would never be able to do that again, that we would never come there as a family again. And that was a tremendously difficult moment as I jumped into the stream, and yet something miraculous happened. I jumped into the stream, and as I came up crying. I'm not ashamed to admit it. I'm the kind of guy that cries relatively freely. But I came up crying tears of joy because something about jumping into the water, into the miraculous waters of Eden, if you will, almost like a mikvah, enabled me to wash away those final remnants of anger and resentment and reach a heartfelt level of forgiveness, which literally changed the course not only of the next 3 weeks of hiking and also my thinking, but also enabled me without question to move to the next stage, the last stage, and the last lesson that I learned, which I'll share with you next week as I ended up heading home. The point is that forgiving, I don't like the phrase forgive and forget. It's okay for us to remember, but to forgive and remember enables us to put aside the kind of historical grievances that we have and reach a real inner sense of peace. Leo Buscaglia, a professor at USC in California, used to teach, I think, what was one of the most popular courses on that campus called Love. And I've read a lot of different books by him and studied his writings when I was at Berkeley studying psychology. He taught in this iconic class about love how important it is, for instance, to forgive our parents for their very humanness. And he passionately advocates this whole issue of moving on and exploring all the alternative paths that are available to us in any situation, as Gandhi did before him. And there are a few incidents that really helped me in that process, and you can see them in the book if you're interested in reaching this profound sense of forgiveness. At Nahal Snir, as I mentioned, in the Burma forest, and all of this set me up for a decisive transition. I really forgave my former wife, truly and completely and deeply, and finally with a full heart. Now, the reason that I wanted to connect the dots here in terms of where we are physically is a little bit broader than my story. If you'll walk with me and bring your water, I want to tell you a little bit more about where we are. I mentioned the name of this area called the Mishlatim, the ridge of hills that are overlooking the Jerusalem-Tel Aviv highway. Now, I'm walking back here to the actual Israel Trail path, where I want to show you first the view from where we were hiking. Not we as in just now, we came from behind me, but this is a view looking towards Jerusalem, towards the west and towards the north. There you can see the hills of Samaria again and the Jerusalem-Tel Aviv highway through the trees. And we're looking here over these hills is Jerusalem. And if you can imagine walking up this path with me, path that I came up as I was walking on that day in 2014. And here's what I saw. I saw something strange in front of me. It's kind of like a a blockage for an artillery or a tank, something to block a tank from. And there's a sign that says Mishlat Sheshesvei. Mishlat being, again, a word that implies a controlling hilltop. And I found myself in an andarta, a memorial grove, planted to memorialize a very, very specific unit in the history of Israel and the history of the IDF. This is Mishlat Sheshesvei, the hilltop of number 16. And what you're seeing here behind me as I walk through it are to those members of the Palmach, the fighting force of the Haganah, of the initial both pre-state and beginning of the state Israel Defense Forces, the Haganah. And these pillars list the exact numbers of Palmach fighters that fell in all sorts of different battles. One of the amazing and most moving things to me when I stumbled upon this Andarta, this memorial, was looking at the names of the places that Palmach fighters had fell. Now, I knew, of course, here there were a number that fell, and I'm going to walk over and describe them because there's a special memorial to 3 young men who fought and died here on this ridge. Avi Perlmutter, Pini Neri, and in the War of Independence. More than that, more than seeing that particular memorial, I was so moved to learn something I wasn't aware of beforehand. And that's why it's so important for me to share this with you. This is not a place that you can get to on a regular tour bus. You have to hike a little bit. And so that's why I'm very, very glad that you're joining me for it. I found here the names of cities where I never knew the Palmach, the lead force of the Haganah, was even active. Iraq, Syria, Iran, in Poland, in various different other places in Europe. And I was extremely moved because, of course, I had been aware that there were fallen in 1946, 47, 48, 49 in the Palmach here in various different battles in the Jerusalem Hills and in Israel. I did not know that there were international activities where members of the Palmach fell defending Jewish lives, protecting Jewish lives, promoting Aliyah and other activities. But specifically as members of the Palmach, these were fighting military activities. I have a feeling that my camera, there we go. Okay, I thought that it shut off for a minute. So why am I here? What's the primary issue that I wanted to share with you today as we talk about gratitude and forgiveness? Well, I guess it could be perhaps obvious, but I'll make it clear. As an Israeli, as a Jew who made Aliyah over 35 years ago, one of the extraordinary elements of hiking the Israel Trail is connecting to our people, to our history, to, of course, the land, but also to the combination and the emotional connection that we have with our ancestors and forefathers. Now, last week I talked about how that connection basically accompanied me as I walked through the desert, imagining myself as one of the children of Israel wandering the desert, and how it was so meaningful to me in the Judean desert where I didn't consider myself a prophet, but I could understand how in the silence of the desert, our prophets received such incredible inspiration and connection to the universe, to God and what have you. And I was connected to our people's history. This connected me to a much more modern sense of history. This made me well up with this sense of appreciation and gratitude for the sacrifices made in order for me to be here, in order for all of us, whether it's you to be able to come and visit once COVID-19 is over, whether it's all of us to be able to live here and build lives here. That sense of gratitude for the sacrifices made for both those dead or injured or suffering from the battles to defend us against those who would destroy us. But it also connects to the issue of forgiveness. And Sarah, you're welcome to let me know by message or even to interrupt me how our time is going. I can see I do have a counter here. We're going to have to wrap up pretty soon and ask for questions. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them, of course. But I do want to make that connection. This issue of forgiveness is so very crucial, I think, not only for our own ability to move on with our lives when we've been hurt, when we're suffering or feeling pain, but on a national level as well. And that's going to be a very important element of my next book, because the truth is, we, the Jewish people and Israelis, Jews and non-Jews, are going to have to learn how to forgive the Arabs for the 100 years of hostility, of violent, aggressive hostility, which has led to so many numerous wars and attacks carried out against us, which I'm reminded of being in a place as moving as this memorial to the Palmach. We're going to have to forgive the Arab world and those who self-identify as Palestinians for their rejection of our legitimacy. We're going to have to forgive the difficulties that they've put us through. And at the same time, the Arab world, the Muslim world, and those who self-identify as Palestinians are going to have to forgive us Jews. They're going to have to forgive us for our insistence on returning to our ancestral homeland after 2,000 years. We never relinquished our connection, of course, to this land, and we were always physically present here. But they're going to have to forgive us for our tenacity. They're going to have to forgive us for the importance of, they're going to have to forgive us for our defensive military operations, which have killed or injured so many of them. They're going to have to forgive us for the fact that we exist and that we insist on continuing to exist and staking our claim to our land. And that includes even the current issue of sovereignty over different parts of the disputed territories, which I'm not getting into pro or con, but the issue of the animosity of the Arab and Muslim world towards the Jewish people, the people of Israel who have returned to the land of Israel and built up this modern nation state of Israel. They're going to have to forgive us for our existence, and they're going to have to accept that existence too. And that's why the issues of humility and acceptance also will play a part, I think, in the end, in any real peace between us and the Arab world. So I'm going to stop here. I see that there's a few questions, and I'm very happy to answer a few questions. Sarah, if there's anything that you want to ask before we close, I'm certainly happy to respond.
Sure. Hi.
There was one question about.
Yep. Go on. Sorry.
There's one question about the issue of forgiveness, and I just want to make it clear. Forgiveness is definitely a two-way street. I had to forgive my wife for her decision. I had to forgive God. I had to forgive fate and also myself. And I needed to be forgiven also for the mistakes that I had made. And I think that's very true in any conflict. I don't care how much we stand on the truth that we are in a defensive military position, and how much we stand on the truth that we have every right to be here and to defend ourselves here in Israel. We still can, and within Jewish tradition, there's a very strong element of forgiving those who have harmed us, but though of course that is going to have to be connected to their acceptance of our legitimacy. Go ahead, Sarah, sorry. I think you're still on mute.
I'm still on mute. No, so someone mentioned in one of the chats just thanking you for sharing your story and your willingness to share the story. But if anyone has any questions, please go ahead and type them in. And if I have one for you, at least on my end, I think that you've definitely expressed this already, but I was wondering if you could take one principal lesson throughout the entire experience. I know it's hard to pick just one, but if you could, what would that one lesson that you picked, or that you felt throughout the entire process?
Well, the truth is, have you lost my picture there?
It's a little, you froze indeed,
Yeah.
But yeah, we can still hear you.
Saw
There,
that. Okay, good.
Okay.
So one issue without question, I would say, I'm just showing the hills of Jerusalem as the sun sets to accompany our last few minutes. Look, the truth is, Sarah, in my book, I describe all 5 of these lessons, and we've discussed 4 of them so far, and they accompanied me throughout the entire experience. The humility I discussed, the acceptance, the issue of gratitude and appreciation for our blessings, and this last issue of forgiveness. There is one more, and it's kind of a spoiler alert, what we'll talk about next week, where I hope to be with you and broadcasting from the sea, from the Mediterranean Sea. We'll be talking about, well, I'll just quote Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, where he took lessons from his experience in the Holocaust and applied that to a whole theory of psychology, which boiled down, if I can, even though it sounds a little bit trite, that we have to have a sense of purpose, a sense of goals and objectives to give our life meaning. And I would say that, without question, accompanied me throughout the whole trip, because every day I had the goal of getting to the night camp for that day, or wherever I buried my water. I had the goal of finishing that week and getting to Shabbat. Of course, I had the goal of finishing the shvil, the trail, and the wider goal of moving on with my life after my divorce. So that certainly is I would say, they accompany me the entire time. We'll talk about that next week, and I hope everybody will join us.
Okay, so we have one more question, actually, and they were wondering, this person's from Germany. How do you feel the corona has made an impact on Jewish peoplehood?
It's a very interesting question. I just picked a photo to share since we're finishing up. Since we were talking about goals and objectives. This is me on the beach, and right before my last Shabbat, the last Sabbath that I spent on the trail on the Sharon Beach north of Herzliya. Thank you for the question, and the answer. I would like to direct you all to an article a friend of mine, Rabbi Ken Spiro, who's a historian and a rabbi and a tour guide, wrote today in the Jerusalem Post. You can see that if you just look up the Jerusalem Post, where he relates very specifically to the sense of unity of humanity, as well as of the Jewish people, that COVID-19 has created as we all work to support each other and to ensure each other's health and welfare and food security and what have you. Although there is part of his article which relates to the divisiveness that also has been part and parcel, especially in the American community, about race issues and also election issues and political issues. But I think that COVID-19 has done more to bring us together as a people and bring us all together as a human race. Speaking of race, that we are all one race, the human race. I think more than it's divided us. And that would be just my personal observation, but I'm delighted to invite you to read Ken Spiro's article in the Jerusalem Post, because he does relate to this, I think, quite a bit. I'm sure that others more learned than I can relate to that issue, of course, and I'm sure they will over the coming weeks and months.
Great. So let's see, we do have to wrap up. We have one more question. If you could answer it quickly. Again, everyone, this is the last question. Sure. How will taking sovereignty over the West Bank help Palestinians to forgive us? That's a pretty loaded, it might take longer than a short answer for that one, to say the very least.
Yeah, I think probably it's best because we're not in a political seminar, and we're here being hosted by the JNF, which is one of the most non-political and unifying forces in the Jewish world, or in the world of Israel supporters. I can only say that every step towards a recognition by the Arab and Muslim world of the connection of the people of Israel to the land of Israel, of the Jewish people to Judea, if you will. And again, that's not political, it's just a geographical description, but it's a linguistic connection. Jews are from Judea, like Arabs are from Saudi Arabia. And the issue of applying sovereignty to any part of this land, whether it's Petah Tikva and Tel Aviv, or Rosh Pinah and the initial settlements of the early Zionist period, all of these are, I believe, part and parcel of movements towards peace, while, whoops.
Yeah, I was going to say, your camera went off for a minute.
Okay, I had lost you there for a minute.
Okay,
I assume we're back. So in any case, I do think that recognition does also fit into what we were saying before about acceptance and forgiveness. And I do believe that real peace will come when all peoples in the region accept each other, and we can live together in peace, like France and Germany have after 800 years of warfare, deciding it's better to live in peace with each other and resolve their conflicts in more diplomatic ways. That would be my relatively brief response. Thank you for the question.
No problem. So thank you all so much. This was a great talk, and we appreciate your time, your energy, your enthusiasm. Again, questions, we are running out of time here. So I just wanted to, again, thank you everyone for attending today. And thank you, Aryeh, for again, your time.
Thank you, Sharon.
Showing us something that we wish that we can, be there in Israel to see ourselves. So I think that it's really helpful for us in America as well, to be able to feel connected to the land when we physically can't.
Well,
so
I certainly hope.
Yeah.
I hope to see you here soon, Sarah, and all of you who are watching. And when you do decide to come, feel free to look me up if you want any pointers on how and where to go, whether it's on the trail or otherwise. And hope to see you next week.
Great, thank you. So everyone, please tune in next week, same day and same time, Thursday at 12 p.m. Eastern, to hear more about Aryeh's journey on the Israel Trail. During this time of distancing, Jewish National Fund USA wants to help you feel closer to Israel. If you like today's call, you will love our #1 podcast, Israelcast, a show featuring inspiring guests from the land of Israel. New episodes come out every other week. They come out on Wednesdays, just so you know, at jnf.org/Israelcast, or simply Google Israelcast. You can also stay engaged and connected by watching other great Jewish and Israel related content at youtube.com/Jewish National Fund. And I know some of you have asked, is the first talk available? Absolutely. It's on Jewish National Fund. That's where you can find it there. Again, we hope to see you again next week, same time. You can access the link from our on-demand page. So thank you all.
Bye-bye. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.